record last year.
Yeah.
I know, I was like, oh, he's gonna
True.
take something.
We'll go back to the Zoom.
It's huge. Well, not this year yet. There's been just 200, 190. The one I was going to take got taken already.
Let's see if you can go either way.
His wife's a realtor, graduated this year. I see his plan. But yeah, he started Gary Pennington last week.
Everybody ready? Yes. All righty, so in that case. All righty. Calling this November 29th, 2022 Bethel Board of Education special meeting to order at 5:01 PM. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Here.
Mr. Elam?
Here.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Here.
Mrs. Donahue? Here. Mr. King?
Here.
Thank you, everyone. First item is a review and approval of the agenda. This is a special meeting, so we can't have any additions to the agenda, but is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman?
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Item 2A is public participation for agenda items only. Sneaking in under the wire. We have our first guest. We're calling for public participation at the moment.
I have some, if you let me.
It's fine. Absolutely.
I'll do paper.
Yeah, you're good. So, Mrs. Reese, I
Yes, thank you.
call you. Call upon you.
Okay, here's my questions. Just questions.
Okay.
On the 5-year forecast, there wasn't a forecast that I could see. I guess because it's not approved. So my one question is, are the operating costs for the new K-5 included in the forecast? And that includes through winter as well as after it opens. On the K-5 kitchen equipment, is this already in the budget and just being approved? Or is it something additional? Where are the funds coming from? And originally we had said we were gonna throw in $100,000 from the food service fund. Is that helping with this, or, just in general, where is the money coming from, and is it already in the budget, but just be approved?
Deep breath. No rush. We're good.
This was a good day to have the Mustang, by the way. Because I got here. I should say that on that. On the interactive projectors, the original budget was 105,000 something. I get things have gone up. So on 9/30 though, there was a special meeting where there was discussion around spending ESSER funds on short throw projectors at a cost of 173,000. Are these tonight's projectors, the interactive projectors, on top of the short throw projectors? And if so, then why both? That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no other slips for public participation. Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Reese. Okay, moving to item 3, recommendations for business. The first item, review and approval of 5-year forecast, and I turn it to you, Mrs. Hickman.
Okay, so hopefully I will address everyone's questions as we go through this presentation, and I'll try and of course, the first screen is always my generic screen that explains why we do a 5-year for anybody that doesn't know at this point, but and what our requirements are. So as you know, when a treasurer does a 5-year, I have to make assumptions. So I have to make some assumptions, sometimes that, based on little to no data. So I'm making revenue assumptions and I'm making expenditure assumptions. So when you look at revenue assumptions for unrestricted grants, which is your state funding that comes from the Fair School Funding Plan. It's supposed to be phased in over 6 years, which is going to be the life of 3 biennium budgets. So we never know from one biennium budget to the next if that's going to continue. So we've got a new biennium budget coming up. So what I assumed is I'm holding our funding at 33.33%, which is what we get of the Fair School Funding Plan for this year. And the increases that you see on the forecast are based on enrollment projections and enrollment projections only. Okay, so if the legislators come out with the new biennium budget and they say, yes, we're going to move ahead and fund, continue the phase in of the Fair School Funding Plan, which is what I'm hoping and praying for, then we're going to be better off than we look on this 5-year. Okay, so this is a little conservative, but I think it's the best option until we hear back on the new biennium budget. And then just a little slide on what the enrollment projections I use to make those assumptions. Real estate taxes, we have the substitute emergency levy in place for 10 years, right? I'm looking at Mrs. Sebastian because she's my fellow treasurer, right? And our current collections is currently 99%, so we're doing pretty good. So we're going to see some pretty good increases. I think our effective rate is at 22.94, but we're getting close to that 20 mil floor. So as we get close to the 20 mil floor, as new, that's a floor. So the good news about being on the floor is as new properties and things get added, it just increases your overall availability. So I'm assuming we're going to renew our income tax at 0.75% earned income only. That continues until December 31st, 2025. All other revenues include the TIF. I've held that revenue stream steady because we've got so many balls in the air right now, right? And if there is going to be additional TIFs, we can only look better, right? So it's a little conservative, but as we work through it, I'm still holding that revenue stream steady for the whole life of the forecast to see if we're going to continue to get 2.5 million or if we'll get more as we move on. I see that going up, but I'm just not sure by how much because there's so many things happening right now. Expenditure assumptions, continued growth projections leads to additional costs, so expenditures are projected to increase along with that, right? Fiscal year 23 this year included 2 administrators. We ended up having to add 7 teaching positions, 4 classroom aides, and new this year, I think it's 4 ELL tutors as well on a part-time basis due to that massive enrollment we had at the beginning of the year of non-English speaking students. Fiscal year 24, it says includes 4 teaching positions and 1 to 2 classified positions, but actually fiscal year 24 is when we're going to be opening the new building. So there's actually more in the forecast, which is 10 certificated and 9 classified.
Is that per year?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So just the 1 year has the bump to
Yes,
10 and 9, and then the other 4 are for like 25, 26.
Correct. So like we hired 7 additional in fiscal year 23 teaching, 4 classroom aides, 2 administrative. Really, it was 1.5. But then fiscal year 24, we're hiring 10 certificated, 9 classified. Fiscal year 25 to 27, each year we have in the forecast 4 certificated and 1 to 2 classified dependent upon enrollment. So I've made it 2, but if we need, based on enrollment. benefits, there's gonna be an increase in cost associated with new staff. Anytime you add new staff, you'll see increased benefit. We saw 7.5% premium increase in fiscal year 22 and a 5% premium increase in 23, which is just, not the norm, especially when you're on a PPO plan. But our current two-year loss ratio is at 56%, which is phenomenal. So our claims experience looks really good. So I'm expecting, maybe 4 to 5% increases in the forecast. Anything more than that, we may need to look at different plans or, things of that nature.
Have we gone back to McGo and Brabender recently to do any analysis?
We have not, no. Mhm.
It might be worthwhile sometime in the next year, it's no rush, just to have them come in again, and since I assume we're still paying them, maybe we're not.
I don't think we are at this point, but, there are other options that we can look at. Purchase services, that's that utility cost. It's increased by $200,000 for operating expenditures at the new building, K through 5. So meaning that I think that's what our utilities costs are gonna be. We're gonna have to keep a close eye on diesel gas prices. We're also continuing the trend of looking at ESC services and reducing those and bringing those in-house as we need to. Supplies and materials increased due to enrollment. So fiscal year 24 through 27, I reduced, look, I didn't even finish that sentence, reduced with the expectation of using permanent improvement funds. So I'm thinking once we're done with the building project, that'll free up our permanent improvement funds and enable us to offset some of that supply and material costs or capital outlay costs.
Did you want to address Lisa's question about utility costs for winter this year?
Those come out of the capital projects budget. That's still part of the building project, yes. So that won't be coming out of our operating budget. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, in the utilities, the contractor, there's money that the contractor has
Mhm.
in their budget to pay for like the propane they use right now. I don't know, was that your question was for next fall?
Well, for this winter
Including-
as well.
Well, this winter, it's already in the building project budget.
Yeah,
So
Yes.
it's not in our,
right.
I don't know how
And
many.
so then I
people-
put an additional 200,000 out there to cover propane and electricity. What's that word? I can't think of it. So we'll keep a close eye on that. The first bill I got said $12,000. I about had a fit. Yeah, but it's only 500. They made an error, so we got it fixed. But yeah. So yes, I have factored that in there. Yeah, I about had a heart attack too. So this is hard to see with two colors of green, but the good news is revenues are currently aligned with our expenditures. So if that trend changes, we need to reevaluate. We do see some separation where our expenditures are growing more than our revenues because we're looking at deficit spending, but it's not too bad considering all the changes that we're going through. So my overall conclusion, the district is projected to be deficit spending. It's fancy term to say we're spending more than we receive each year. Beginning in fiscal year 24, but we have positive cash balances throughout the life of the forecast. Now, it gets to where we only have 15 days cash on hand in fiscal year 27, but that last year is always, a guess, because there's so many things that can and will change. So we do, given that, we will, may need to look at additional revenue if the Fair School Funding Plan is not continued in the biennium budget, or if they decide this is as much as we're funding, we're gonna have to look at ways to cut cost or, look at ways of getting additional revenue. You can't cut staff because you need them because you got kids, right? You got all these kids that we've got coming in here. So The things that I'm gonna keep an eye on, of course, is the state biennium budget and see if we can get the full phase in of fair school funding. And so, and hopefully they don't put any caps on us, meaning that we'll only give you 3% more than you got last year or anything like that. They've done crazy stuff, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. And then we gotta continue to look at student enrollment growth and where we need to be. So if we need to adjust numbers up or down, we can take a look at that, as well as the TIF revenue and growth. I will say, this district has a lot of moving parts.
That's fair.
And a lot of, plates in the air. But it's difficult to sort of put the numbers on a page. But one of the things I say in my notes, if you read through those, are that this forecast will change. It's not a worst case scenario kind of forecast, because I don't want people thinking I'm Chicken Little and running around with my head chopped off. But it is somewhat, it's conservative, right? But even being conservative, we're deficit spending. Let me throw this up here. Oh, that's hard to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why does that keep moving up there? It's gonna be hard there. So all these red numbers on your 6.01, which is your, expenses over revenues, that causes me concern. But at the end, we still have positive cash flow, right? So these numbers I'm not too happy about, because we're spending more than we're receiving every year. But if the Fair School Funding Plan goes into effect or any of that, these variables will change.
Mrs. Hagan,
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to pull this back up?
would you please?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
What can you tell me about, oh, no, where it was, there you go. Oh, keep going.
Keep going here.
Yeah, there you go. Restricted state grants and aid,
Yes.
400%, can you?
Yeah, as part of the Fair School Funding Plan, they gave us more money, but they also restricted some of that money. So used to be, it was just career tech, and what we used to call economically disadvantaged, right? It's now disadvantaged pupil impact aid, DPIA, which is economically disadvantaged with the new name, English learners, gifted, student wellness and success, as well as career tech. So now there are 5 different buckets of restricted funding that we have to monitor and make sure we are spending correctly. So when you look at 20 and 21, before the new fair funding model, you were only getting about 21 to 29,000 a year in restricted grants. Now we're looking at 255, 376, and 412, because there are more buckets and we have more students in those buckets.
Okay, there was another one, if you'll scroll down.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that's up 4,345%. It's a little farther down, right there. Screen, total other financing uses.
Right. Last year and this year, we're making 2 transfers out of the operating budget into the capital projects fund to take care of the building project using the Fair School funding money that we got. So you're going to see big increases for that, but then it goes back down to 40. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I sort of just wanted to touch on while we're here, we did hire a new EMIS person. And if you noticed on the forecast, there's some significant increases in unrestricted. Oh, I should just keep this open so I don't keep doing this. But so now we're looking at 6,900,000 and in unrestricted and 376. And I have seen increases across the board in all of our funding since Mrs. Mason has been here and has been working on cleaning up our data. And we've had 200 plus kids at the beginning of the year. So just in base cost funding, our first payment in October said our annual amount was going to be like 3.5 million. And so then our second payment in October, once we submitted our first round of student data, went from 3.5 million to 3.7. Okay, so there's been some significant deep dive data cleanup. And then in special education, we went from having, 526 to 554. So 526,000 to 554, and we're still working on cleaning up some of that data. So, it's all moving in the way that I was hopeful it would. And so I think that was, a good decision on behalf of the district to go ahead and hire somebody full-time to take care of that, because that's contributing to those significant increases in state funding.
It's almost $250,000.
It is.
Yes.
From one staff member.
Yes.
In one bucket.
One bucket, yeah. So as I'm going through and looking, I'm gonna also be looking at November. It's a moving target, right? Because as we add kids and lose kids, they no longer just take one head count. It's a constant submission of data. But I mean, I'm elated because we're finally getting paid what we need to be paid for these kids. So that's how crucial EMIS is and making sure we have that data in place.
When your average per pupil spending is where it is for our district, it's
Mhm.
important that we do recoup wherever we can recoup. So
Right.
that's wonderful. That's excellent. Excellent.
So did I cover everything, Jill? Okay. All right. So
Other concerns, questions from the board?
The only one I have is our cash balance policy,
mhm,
that relates to the 5-year forecast. If we're only going to 15 days, our cash balance policy says we'll have 2 months.
right, says 60 days. 15 days is in fiscal year 27.
Okay.
I think we're okay for the next couple years. And I think that's gonna be, we're gonna have to look at it again in June or July. And yeah, when we do the May update, if we haven't heard about the new biennium budget, which I don't expect us to, usually it's always at the, the 11th hour. Yeah. Probably in July or August, we will do a new 5-year because our situation will change drastically dependent upon what that new biennium budget's gonna be. So, we probably will have to, I will probably need to do a new one, because there are so many variables that are still up in the air for here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My only question, I was just gonna ask about the projected enrollment. I just wanted to ask if you used what Mr. Crispin put together recently
Yes.
and distributed to all of us?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Which was about all the way through, 10 students per grade.
Oh, the enrollment projection.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you changed.
Okay, yeah. And that was based on kind of current data, best you could
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Actually, it was kind of the study you shared with me that was done. What was the date of that?
As we were trying to go into the help with OFCC, I still had that study, so I forwarded it to him when he sent it out to see if there was any other information. I was trying to find, but I don't have it anymore, was the report that Julie put together when she was on the board that had the projections out.
All the way up 50 years.
Yeah, based on what we were seeing, land that was available, all those different pieces. I didn't have that to share with you, but it's obviously way higher than what I sent you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see there OFCC is totally off on their comparisons. We're just unique. We don't fit the regular model. You start looking at death rates and birth rates for population growth. Our issues are completely different than that, and that is building land, homes, and people moving here with kids, not having them here. So utilizing birth rate is difficult to do in our projections as well. But I thought I would share with you that.
Yeah, that was great.
I still have that, welcome to it, of course. You should
Please,
just text it
yeah.
me.
Oh, yeah, please, yeah.
So, but I was looking for it on my notes, and I don't have it, so.
Well, and I don't know if you saw today, but the Miami County Commissioners voted to accept the annexation petition for 260 acres to the city of Huber Heights. So if the city of Huber Heights proceeds with that, that will affect our enrollment and all that. I can forward a copy of what they posted 3 hours ago.
Well, and that was probably one of the best things we did when we went into the ELP program, that we were guaranteed a new evaluation for our growth and those factors. We were accepted into the OFCC portion, so we would get a new assessment, so we could show where they were wrong in. Hopefully, hopefully get more return on our investments from, for that money to be returned from the OFCC, because they should have included that square footage of what we increased in those little sections. So hopefully it'll turn back around when that happens and help, and do a new study so that we can actually continue on with the projects to really get closer to growth.
Recoup everything we can. Absolutely. Further questions or concerns about the 5-year?
I just want to thank Tina for all her work. I didn't look at her presentation, but I went through her numbers last night whenever she had it posted. And I think the two big things under revenues, besides what she's already discussed, is, the income tax for us is really a source of stability, and it will continue to grow as the community grows. The property tax is more stable, and as she already mentioned, it really depends on the 20 mil floor, whether that will exceed expectations. But the revenue stream coming in is good, and if the Fair School funding plan comes through, we'll be in good shape. But again, with that new development, there's a lot of unforeseen expenses. So.
The only other thing that I would add as we talk about the 5-year forecast is, as we are deficit spending in next year, there's only a few things that we can do to help limit those costs, right? That's energy and benefits. Finding other ways to provide with less increase, better provide or something to that effect, or offering different plans as we work through negotiations with unions. Those are pretty much the two key pieces with that. But with that statement, also following up with the fact that majority of our teachers and staff are underpaid, significantly in regards to the regional, what read just in Miami County, significantly under what they're being paid at other schools. And so I think that has an impact on maintaining staff. When they can go make $15,000, $20,000 more just in another town close to us. So keeping those on point as well, that we are staying in line with income and costs, because we're way under in pay.
Right.
Than what I think we should be. So I think that has to be noted.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Agreed. Oh, okay. So points, Mr. King?
Yeah, and competitive pay is really district-wide. It's not just teachers. It's
Right.
all
Yeah.
over. So I don't want anybody to think it's just
It's
teachers.
nationwide, it's worldwide, but
But
it's
it's-
definitely impacting our district for sure.
It's just like, similar to what retail's experiencing. It's everywhere, but we are gonna have to focus on that the next year or two, and that will affect our expenses.
Like Mr. Crispin says, there's great things happening here in Bethel, and we want to
Amen.
keep it happening,
Amen.
right?
Yep.
Absolutely. We want to make sure we can retain the excellent people that make that possible every single day. Okay. Well, if there's nothing further, I'm looking for a motion then to
Motion.
approve the 5-year forecast as presented.
Mr. King.
Mr. King moves, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Sebastian. And your vote, abstain?
Oh, you got a lot of staples.
No, it's in the wrong spot, isn't it?
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Thank you.
Approved with a 5-0 vote. Thank you, everyone. Moving on then to item B, review and approval of cafeteria equipment purchase for the K-5 building. I believe that is also you.
That is also okay. So initially, when I got here in the district, we had promised $100,000 out of the food service fund to help buy equipment for the new K-5 building. So that's great. Here's the wonderful news is that you ended the year with $800,000+ in your kitchen, in your food service fund. And you can only have 30 to 60 days worth of money in that fund without getting your little hands slapped. So we'll probably get our hands slapped a little bit. So I thought, why not buy a little more equipment for the new building and give us some more money to spend on the K-5 wing, freeing up some of those contingency funds. So I asked them to take a look at about 210,000 instead of just the 100. And so that's what I'm asking the board to consider. They did go out to bid. They've got 3 separate bids that they provided to me. And of course, Breckenridge Kitchen Equipment is for $208,756. Stafford Smith is $211, and CMT was $222. So this is not all of the equipment that's going to be in the kitchen. Worked with Peterson to try and get us as close to 210 as we could, looking at all the bids. And I think this is a good thing. One, we want to try and save enough money in the project to get all of the 5th grade wing done and all the contingency funds for that. And 2, we need to spend that money. So this is a good way to do that.
What is the hand slapping benchmark?
Usually they don't want you to have or carry more than 60 or 90 days of cash in your food service fund. So, yeah.
I mean, like a number.
It
Ballpark.
really depends on what your 30, 60, 90-day spend is, right? So, yeah. But you did really well because everybody ate for free, right? And so all those meals were reimbursed. And so in this situation, that's more than we typically get in revenue. And the fact that your staff, most of your staff is part-timers and don't have benefits. So, you know, you're one of the few districts that I know of that is looking at a surplus, nevertheless a surplus of that nature, right? So it's a good thing, but it's also a double-edged sword. So that's why I sort of suggested we up the ante a little bit because we had some extra money in that fund. We will issue the purchase order and we will purchase directly from Breckenridge if that's the board's, if the board approves that change. Sort of like what we did with the cafeteria tables, we're just gonna buy it directly out of food services fund. And that will satisfy that 100,000 plus, you know, so.
So is there a motion to approve cafeteria equipment purchase for Breckenridge Equipment for the K-5 building?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Is there a second? Is that Mrs. Donahue then?
Mhm.
You're kind of battling it out down there for the
No, I
second.
just didn't hear what I was trying to.
So I have a motion from Mr.
I was getting
Elam.
ready to say,
Okay, so a motion from Mr. Elam and a second from Mrs. Donahue. Is there discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Elam, when you're ready, please call the vote.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Okay, 5-0 vote passed on that item. And moving to item C, review and approval of interactive projectors purchased for the K-5 building. Back to you, Ms.
Back
Hagan.
to me. As you know, we talked a few months ago about using the ESSER state activity money that we got extra to buy projectors for the new building. And I apologize, I'm not a technology person, so maybe I used the wrong terms, but they are, and it's just one set of projectors for the K-5 building. If we're using federal funds, we have to go with prevailing wage, and we have to use the lowest of 3 or more bids, right? So thank you, Lori, for calling about that prevailing wage, because I had missed that on my first bid document, so I apologize. So looking at the 3 sets of bids, SecureCom with prevailing wages, $153,486.70. And Solomon Electric is $167,390, and then Area Energy and Electric is $177,379. This will not come out of the project fund. This will come out of the ESSER state activity money that we discussed. Using prevailing wage, we knew the amount would go up. Using federal funds, we knew the amount would possibly go up. But I think this is more inflation, supply chain kind of thing, because the prevailing wage addition was like $2,500. So not a whole lot, because it's really just on the installation, not on the product, right? So.
So looking for a motion for approval of interactive projector purchase for the K-5 building
I'll move.
from SecureCom. Sorry, thank you, Mrs. Sebastian. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. King. Discussion, please.
The question I have is this one of the items that the teachers were asking for? Like, they were adamant that they truly needed them to help educate in the classroom? Am I correct?
I know they were involved with some site visits and choosing this type of projector. That's what I know.
Yeah, this was one of the alternates or whatever that we were able to fund, and this was, now, I'm not sure because it's, technology changes if this is the exact thing they wanted, but it's hopefully
I just
something
remember us,
Is
we
it-
had it as an alternate, and they were
Yeah.
adamant, like, if we do not want to give that up, we'll give up nice chairs or something, just so we can have that, yeah. So,
But this should be like whatever the successor,
Right in line
if
with
it's
that.
not the exact thing, it's supposed to be.
the
That's
intent of what they
intent.
were saying they
That's the
needed.
intent.
And these are the short throw projectors that we've heard so much about, correct? That's the same thing. When we
Same
say
thing as
interactive,
interactive,
short
yeah, they're
throw, all
interchangeable.
the same
Yep.
thing, right?
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, I'm like,
I've learned that through the.
Yeah.
I think I saw that on one of the quotes, so I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that I was not, technology sort of, but not really, so. Further discussion?
Yeah, and this isn't really very important, but it is because if the auditors come in, they want to know, in the ESSER funds, we had to have prevailing wage. That was the requirement of using them. And for some reason, 2 of these quotes had, if you need prevailing wage, it wasn't included in the quote. It was like an extra. It didn't
Right.
change the order of the
no.
bids or anything,
Still
but
have to- yeah.
I want to make sure we approve the right amount.
Correct, yes.
So SecureCom
So
is
that's
still
what that
lowest,
was about.
same
Still
price.
lowest, yeah. I think their prevailing wage addition was 2,500. So yeah, because the prevailing wage only applies to when they come to install the actual projectors, so.
Further questions?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so I know the work was done up front to make sure that they, got the right type of technology that they wanted. Since we've talked about this before, has anybody come back recently and have we done a further check to say, this is what we are gonna order and this is still what you want? Is that, I think that happened. Is that a true
Yes.
statement?
Yes.
And that was
Mhm.
recent then?
Yep. Because, that was just part of my getting up to speed with the site visits and Laura Lil sent me all the notes from that and the different options they had actually looked at, and indeed went back to Mrs. Henry and said, sure, this is it, right? Yeah, that's it. So,
Good, I just wanted to confirm that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion and a second. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman, please call the roll.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes?
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Okay, motion also passes with a 5-0 vote. Next item on the agenda is a possible executive session if needed. Does anyone have a need for an executive session at this time? Also hearing none, we move on to the final item, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King. Is there a second? Mrs. Sebastian with the second. Jeez, guys, don't try and get rid of me. Just kidding. Okay. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman?
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
That's with a 5-0 vote, meeting adjourned at 5:41 PM. Thank you, everyone, for your time and efforts. Appreciate it. Thanks for attending, Mrs. Sweet.
Go get it. Doing my best.
Unless it's about one.
Not one.
I just went through the agenda. My bad. I didn't
Have it.
pay attention to whether it was on the.
Oh.
It was.